Good morning. I'm continuing my series on the Sinkfield Cup in 2014. And in round 3, Caruana has the black pieces against Magnus Carlsen. Uh, so, get rid of that. Carlsen plays e4, e5, and Carlsen plays bishop to c4, the so-called bishop's opening. This can be very tricky and can lead to some aggressive play and can lead to some sacrifices. There are some counter sacrifices for black, but none of them really sound enough for this level of play. So Caruana chooses the most solid and most sound defense against the bishop's opening, which is knight to f6, the so-called Berlin defense. Not the Berlin defense in the Royal Lopez, the Berlin defense in the bishop's opening. So Carlsen plays a d3. He succeeded in getting his bishop outside the pawn chain early and defending the e-pawn with the d-pawn, and now he's free to put his knight on d2, e2 for example. Might make it easier for him to play f4 and drum up a kingshead attack in that way. Caruana realizes he's got to fight for the centre here. So he plays c6 to give himself the choice of playing b5 or d5. And Carlsen doesn't fight against that idea with knight to c3 because the knight could just be pinned by the bishop. So he puts himself nearer to castling to combat that idea, but he can't now stop d5, which is why this is considered the most solid defense to the bishop's opening. So the bishop retreats. He doesn't want to take the pawn, and indeed if Caruana takes the pawn now, then Carlsen has a little trap, which obviously Caruana doesn't fall for. If he takes the pawn and the pawn is taken back by white, Carlsen is threatening bishop takes f7, check, and the king would have to move, and the queen would end up undefended. But obviously that's not going to happen here. And it's Carlsen's move anyway, so he doesn't take the pawn on e4. Instead, he chooses to develop. So he's ready to castle with his next move. So if he plays here with the knight, Carlsen will just castle and be very happy. So he's developed his piece with a check as Caruana. So Carlsen has only one reply, which keeps up the same tempo, holds. It's a very tactical opening. Quick development. You've got to be just as quick as your opponent. There's only one move which keeps pace, which is c3, so that he blocks the check and attacks the bishop at the same time. The bishop comes to d6 to support the e5 pawn, which was then hanging. Yeah, this means Carlsen gets to swap off in the centre, and even though it's a small and a bit backward centre that he creates in that way, he does create a centre for himself if he wishes to take the pawn. But instead of taking the pawn straight away, he pins the knight so that the knight can't take on d5. So that he's trying to take, and if he takes back with the queen, then he can take with the bishop, and the knight's still pinned. So for that reason, Caruana takes the pawn himself, and Carlsen takes back. And now there are threats of a discovery on the queen. This is known as putting the question to the bishop. The question being, do you want to take that knight or not? And Caruana says, well, let's wait and see, which is probably the best. This pin can be awkward to get out of, but Caruana does it in a very instructive way. There are a few ways, but this is a good way to deal with this pin on this knight. So now Caruana plays e7, and he's got his queen on a great square. And you can see that he can play, for example, bishop here, and then knight here to defend the knight, and then the queen is free to move around the cabin, as the saying goes. So Carlsen defends his knight, and the knight comes to d7. He's not bothered about the bishop not being able to develop. Now, if he had a square for his queen, he would be able to move his queen now, but he doesn't have a square for his queen at the moment. So, but the bishop goes to b3 and attacks the pawn. So he's got two attackers on the e pawn now, Carlsen. So he's changed the focus of his attack. And Caruana, very clever move, c7, bishop to c7. It gives him maybe chances to play some kind of a battery. Yeah, allows him maybe to move the knight away so that he can then pin the knight. It just increases his freedom and takes his bishop out of an attack on the d file, because it might be possible for Caruana, for example, Carlsen, for example, could have played knight c4, and then he's twice attacking that bishop, and instead of letting him gain a tempo by attacking twice, Caruana just retreats the bishop. And Carlsen castles, and Caruana plays knight to h5 to attack the bishop. You have to be careful when playing this kind of move, because as soon as the knight moves, then it reveals an attack on the knight on h5. So when the knight moves, for example, by capturing the pawn on e5, you also attack the knight at the same time. But Carlsen plays h3 to partly to give his king an escape square, and partly to encourage Caruana to take the bishop on g3. And he takes the bishop on g3, and Carlsen takes, and now he's threatening this, and when the knight moves, it will be a double check. So this is getting dangerous for Carlsen. Caruana comes to c5 to attack the bishop on b3, so that, you know, one of the double attack elements could be taken care of. Carlsen sacrifices his bishop, and Caruana takes with the king. Oh no. And Carlsen double check with the knight, check with the bishop. But it isn't as dangerous as it looks. Caruana finds a way to defend. Caruana is now a piece up, and the knight is threatened. But it's difficult. So, plays king to g8, and the knight comes to g6 to attack the queen, and also to reinforce an attack on the f8 square. Caruana, yeah, when you're attacked, you know, it's good if you can, instead of just defending, create your own attack, and this is what Caruana goes for here with the move queen g5. The f8 square is defended by the knight, so the king is forced to h7, and the knight takes, not the rook, so that he's threatening to come here with the knight and attack the queen. But it might have been better to just take, with the rook, and then get the knight out of there by retreating to f4, just giving up that pawn, and then coming to f3 with your queen. It might have been better, I'm not sure, but this gives Caruana the chance to play bishop to g4. Can't he just take that? Yeah, he can take it in two different ways. He can take it with the queen, or he can take it with the pawn. The problem is that bishop to b4 didn't just attack the queen, it revealed an attack on the rook. And the queen moves to defend the rook. Yeah, great move. So they're both playing really good, exciting attacking chess. The knight comes to d3. Obviously, he's now threatening to take the rook here. But his main threat is if the rook is taken here by Carlsen, then Caruana will play queen to d3 check, and then get all that kind of potential smothered mate loveliness in the corner. So the queen takes the knight, and the rook takes the rook. So now Caruana has 2 pieces, and Carlsen has 2 pieces. So we're back to material equality, but Carlsen has 6 pawns against 5. But look at his pawns. If he takes the pawn now on b5, then g4, sorry, then he's got tripled pawns. Not particularly nice. But he does have a cleverer way of going about things. He takes the pawn, it's taken back, and he brings his knight into the game. But now he has the threat of playing e5 check. The queen takes the pawn, so now Caruana has just as many pawns as Carlsen, and he's threatening mate, or threatening a check, or threatening to take the rook here and play check on h2. Great. Deals with that threat by moving his pawn, blocking the communication between the bishop and the queen, and saying check at the same time. King takes, and the pawn comes forward once more. The knight at the moment is an adequate defender of the h2 square, and it doesn't work to sacrifice the rook here. It just doesn't work. But both diagonals are open, and Caruana exploits the other diagonal with bishop to b6 check, and the king is forced into the corner. And now Carlsen might just be able, Caruana, if he gets a check on the h file, that's going to be leading to checkmate. So he comes back and threatens queen to h5 check. Yeah, Carlsen supports the pawn, and at the same time gives his queen access to the defensive square h2, and also from where it stands defends the knight if it comes to h2 to block the queen. And so the rook comes to d8, and obviously if queen takes, well, covered by the bishop, so he can't. So queen has to move. It's only got one square. It's got actually 2 squares where it's good. Carlsen has got to keep covering the h2 square so that this doesn't lead to mate. So Caruana threatens the queen one more time. b8 check. Again, Carlsen manages to play a check and diffuse a threat from Caruana at the same time. The king comes to h7, and I think that was the last fatal mistake, to push the pawn to e7, because Caruana then gets queen to h5 check, and the knight comes, but this allows Caruana to play rook to d1 check, and follow up by queen to d1, and the only move then is to put the knight in the way. And now Carlsen is a piece, and Caruana is a piece in front. And after that, Caruana resigns. It's not going to go well. He has just one move here, which allows Carlsen to play a check here, and then he will be winning this pawn. And he can stop this pawn now as well, Caruana. So he will just end up being a piece up. We'll stop this pawn. And yeah, nothing to do. A really good game by both, but Caruana was definitely better. And in 2014, it wasn't often that Magnus lost a game with the black pieces. But great game by Caruana, and the saga continues. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to my videos. Thanks. Bye.